Hi everybody, welcome to another episode of Inside HR. I'm Mick, your host here with TRAFFIT ATS, and today we have a very, very special guest that's joining me from across the Atlantic today. It's our first guest from America. Laura, thank you so much for joining me today and the watchers on Inside HR. How are you doing today?
Great, and thank you for having me, Mick. It's fun to talk across the pond, and it's important now more than ever to have a global community. So I'm so delighted to talk HR with you today.
I agree. And Laura, so, talking about community, I saw that you have an amazing following on LinkedIn. This is how I was lucky enough to kind of, get connected to yourself. Could you tell me a little bit about what you do and about Eastside Staffing, which is your firm, I believe?
Thank you. Yeah, I started my own business 7 years ago, which is very exciting. And I specialize solely in the placement of HR professionals. So recruiting HR, which is kind of a specific niche and a lot of fun. I just redid my website a couple days ago, actually, and I now am doing some coaching and some training for HR professionals as well. I found during the pandemic there have been a lot of pros needing help with their job search and also with their hiring efforts, and really looking for additional coaching and consulting, which is great. I'm always supportive of HR pros investing in themselves. So yeah, it's been very exciting. Obviously a challenging year with the pandemic, but fun to be creative and think of different ways to serve the community.
Sure, perfect. And I believe I'm not the first person that you have a good contact with from the Polish market, especially, our common connection and one of the previous guests of the show, Kasia Tang, is that right?
Yes, we became very good friends via Twitter. And in the depths
Sure.
of the lockdown of April, she actually taught my mom and I how to make pierogies. So we
Okay.
did a whole cooking segment on Zoom. Yeah, but she's great. And we're always talking about different HR trends. And like you and I, she shares a great passion for this community as well.
Perfect, Laura. So we talked a little bit before we started the show, and I think we're going to really dig into this one, which is one of the core topics that I've got is the viewers have heard me say this before. I've been in the HR space only around 3.5-4 months now, and I spent a lot of time trying to understand the space and HR professionals and all these companies that don't even actually invest in HR yet. And one of the things I found is that HR still isn't valued as much as it should be. And I was just as much, let's say, guilty of that before I joined the space, where I thought, okay, HR is things that companies need to have, but they mostly handle paperwork and so on. And then, I looked at the COVID times, and I saw that HR was a department that kind of was up top when companies were starting to make cuts. And I'm like, wait a minute, I'm starting to realize by talking to HR professionals how much they are the core element of a company's heartbeat kind of thing. Are they helping, employees transition or not? I mean, from I don't think that, tell me, first of all, is America different, or is the global view different from here in Europe? Is HR undervalued in your opinion?
Yeah, I think it is a global issue. I actually think Europe is ahead of us in how recruiting is valued. So recruiting is even more undervalued in America, in my experience. But I think overall, what you've said is true. I think it's kind of a vicious cycle, and I'm not sure, we always say what came first, the chicken or the egg, right? What's the catalyst? I don't know if it's the outside voice saying HR isn't valuable, who cares about them? Or if it's actually HR pros not standing in their own value and their own worth. So it's a bit of a challenge, because if you talk to other professionals, especially sales or marketing leaders, there's not a base of insecurity there. They're quite confident in what they do and what they offer. And I don't mean that to sound arrogant. I think they genuinely believe in what they do and believe in the power they have in an organization. Sometimes I think HR pros have taken a victim mentality, which I know when I say this, a lot of HR pros are like, no, not me. And it's annoying to hear, but as every growing pain is, there's a reason it's hard to hear, because sometimes it hits a chord of truth. The victim mentality says, well, no one likes me anyway, no one values me anyway, so I kind of stay down. And I think the way we help the profession move forward is to actually empower HR pros to stand in their worth. And then I think we will start to see other people start to see their value, which is why in COVID, you probably had these new epiphanies, which is great. Because I think, I don't know where I read it, but they said, in 2008, it was the CFO who took us out of that crisis. And this time it's the chief HR officer that's taking us out. And that's
Sure.
profound. So if HR isn't feeling that enthusiasm and excitement around what they do now, it's, this is
And
the time.
you almost tend to feel like they maybe are not, right? I mean, I think that they should, and like I believe, or again, I think that the HR space has widened in terms of there is a group of HR professionals that really are starting to know their worth. They're getting better at communicating it, which is great. But it also means that the gap is widening between the big group of HR professionals that still don't feel it and are not sure how to do it. I think that's my brief impression, let's say.
Yeah, it's funny. I recently on Twitter, I don't remember days or months anymore. This could have been a year ago.
Sure.
I had tweeted something about, HR pros need to really defend their worth even with their own salary negotiation, their own bonuses, et cetera, because they're always underpaid, typically underpaid.
Mm-hmm.
And someone in HR tweeted back to me like, well, our job isn't as important as the chief legal officer or the chief financial officer, so of course we don't earn as much. And I wrote back saying, this is the issue. Like, if you don't believe you're worth it, then me being an advocate for you isn't going to help, right? Like, you and I can't care more about their well-being than they do. And that's why I'm always trying to empower them of like, you've got a lot of people in your corner that are fighting for you and advocating for you and cheering for you, but you at the core have to believe in yourself. And if you always feel second to everyone else around you at the leadership table, then you're absolutely right. They don't get things accomplished because they're sort of stuck and they're in their own way, right? There's that phrase of like, you're in your own way. I think this is exactly what it is.
Yep. So I asked this on a brief, and I think it's an interesting question. So if you had a magic wand and tomorrow you had a choice of one or two things, that either everybody in a company started to respect HR more, or HR professionals started to respect themselves and command more, which is the right way to go? Like, is there a right way, and which one do you think is the secret sauce, let's say?
Yeah, I was just talking about this with a friend of mine in the UK named Kelly Swingler, who I just told you about in the beginning of the show. So Kelly, if you're watching this, you might be a guest here soon. She and I just did a video talking about this similar topic, and she said that both really need to be happening at the same time, which I thought was such a great point. We're always kind of trying to figure out the magic solution, but truly it's kind of both parties' job, right? So the CEO needs to start really understanding what their people function does, and they can do that by learning and reading and watching things like this. And then the people function needs to really start believing in themselves. I think they truly do have to be happening simultaneously. I think where people struggle, and I read a lot of an author named Dr. Brene Brown, you might have heard of, and she's a researcher out of Texas. She studies human behavior and psychology, and she's fascinating. She always says in her research, though, it's important to speak your truth, even if your voice shakes, which I love. Like, it's scary, but you can be scared and brave at the same time. So that's how I always empower HR pros when they say to me like, oh, I wanna get TRAFFIT, but it's expensive. I don't know how to ask for it. Or I want to use you, Laura, on a search, but I don't know how to ask for your fee. I say, go in there and speak your truth, even if your voice shakes, even if you're scared to ask for it. Go. And as Kelly would say, don't even ask for it. Just go in and say, this is what I need.
Yep.
And I'm curious if you found that with like heads of sales or heads of marketing, if they want to use your service, do they even ask the CEO or do they just go in there and tell them?
Well, yeah, I mean, again, it's like, from my experience is that they are the kind of people within the companies that have already kind of either, like you said, either they have everything structured in a way that they already know how much they can spend. So they have these conversations like my budget for the year is this, this, and this. But don't get me wrong, I also know many heads of sales that have just gone, well, I'm spending $10,000 more because it's going to work, and they have this mentality of it's better to ask for forgiveness than permission. Like, let me go and prove myself. I believe in myself, and if I get it wrong, I can also go into the CEO or the board and hold my hand up and say, I got this wrong. And and because this is one thing, because one of the questions I wanted to ask is, do you think the fear that HR professionals have of asking for money or asking for tools is real, and that CEOs really do reject a lot of the requests, or this is actually just inside them, and most CEOs are open to spending this kind of any kind of budget on HR?
Yeah, I think this is such a great question. I think you really hit something there that I want to think more about is like this idea of asking for forgiveness versus permission. I think a lot of HR pros walk on eggshells and they are so worried to make a mistake. And that's not all their fault, of course. That's a lot of conditioning around HR having to be perfect and having to be robotic and guarded and formal and all these things that we're unlearning and untangling. So I never want HR pros to feel that we're putting the blame on them by saying this, but I do want to address it. I think that, for example, okay, to hire an external recruiter like me, there's a fee. If I talk to a head of HR who's feeling insecure and unworthy, they might say, there's just no way we'll get that approved. Absolutely not. We can't do it. If I happen to know the CEO or the CEO emails me or whatever, they might say, of course, you tell me your fee and we're going to do it. You're the best in this space. You're the one we want. No problem. When I go back to HR, they'll say, oh, well, they told me a year ago no, or they told me once no, and I'm scared to ask again. I'm scared to go again. The fear is real. So to answer your question, it is a real fear. I don't know exactly where it comes from. It is something that, I think a lot of HR pros need to really challenge those fears though, right? It's like, what am I so scared of? I'm going to get fired for asking for a budget? No, you're not. I mean, you're definitely not.
It's this just preconception that needs to be broken down, right? I mean, I think one of the things that I really noticed as well, and maybe this is part of that kind of misconception or this kind of feeling inside the company is HR don't really also celebrate the wins. So I'm sat there going, okay, the sales team make a sale or they hit a quota or they hit a target. And you know how it is. Every company has 10 different ways that they celebrate. They're ringing the bell. The email goes out to everybody. Sales team beat the quota by 50%, high five. And then I'm thinking, okay, HR people recruit 10 really important people a year. When they fill that role, they are not high-fiving. Nobody is kind of going, thank you so much for filling that role yet. However, it's so much, the person that they just hired may be the key to the company growing, X amount of percent. And again, it's chicken and egg, as you've mentioned so rightly before. Is that the fault of the HR person? I truly am kind of unfortunate because I'm from sales background. I think I'm like, come on, HR people, like, I believe in you. Laura believes in you. A lot of people believe in you. You got to kind of go out there and say, hey, listen, look at that. Look at how well that person is doing that I hired 6 months ago. And slowly start to build your own profile in the company. On the other hand, like you said, I totally get that a lot of people are belittling those kind of successes and they don't see the long term. But yeah, I don't see HR people, they take a lot of the losses, but they don't take a lot of the wins.
Yeah, what's coming up for me is kind of two things. One, I think CEOs need to really realize the power of a good people function and the power of a strong recruitment function and why that's an important investment. So that's on them to figure out. The other thing I keep thinking about is things like guilt and blame and shame. Like we have to remove that, all of us, from this equation because we're trying to evolve HR and grow HR. To do that, we're going to uncover some stuff we don't like. There's going to be some of that icky, like, and we all have to be careful. Like, even you said, like, oh, I used to be guilty of that. It's like, don't worry. It's, just move forward.
Sure.
It's like Maya Angelou says, when we know better, we do better. So when I talk about this, I often get emails, and we might today, from HR pros who say to me, oh, I used to do that. I feel awful. Or, you're right. I'm so horrible. Don't do that. It's like, that's how we grow, right? So yeah, you might see parts of yourself that all of a sudden, because we're talking about it, you realize, crap, that's an area I really need to work on. But like, that's the beauty of it. Like, work on it, and don't spend so much time beating yourself up for not knowing this yet. Same with the CEO. You might say, oh no, I've never invested properly in recruitment till now. Great. So today you're starting anew. I mean, I think this is important because I think people get really caught up in guilt and shame, and then they don't move forward. They're just so busy berating themselves for it. It's like, or judging each other for it. Like, oh, that company over there is terrible at it. Okay, so were you 2 years ago. I mean,
yes. Yeah, and I mean, that leads me to a great question, which is, again, I know, is there any success stories? Have you coached any HR professionals where you've they really actually, because I also want to make sure that people who are watching today, they know that it can happen. I mean, we're saying the right things, but has it happened? Have you seen it happen in a company?
Yeah. So I spent a lot of time this year thinking about my company values and really identifying them. And so you'll read them on my website, but they're kindness, curiosity, and humility. And I write on my site and I tell all of my clients, I hope that you're willing to embrace those with me when we start a new search. And I find that if a company is willing to embrace curiosity and humility when they're hiring, they become extraordinary. That is hard because they have to be willing to say, I don't know everything. What worked for me 6 months ago may not work today. And I really want to learn how to hire better. And it's like, that's the part when companies or hiring managers start talking that way, it's a beautiful thing to watch because they're really curious, they're open, they're like a student of hiring. And they're the ones who can provide the best candidate experience, the best journey, the least, exclusive or biased, because they're really like a sponge, they're receptive. The ones who struggle the most are like, I want to do it the way I always did it. And that's it.
Yep.
I don't want any surprises. I don't want to learn anything new. And I've turned clients away for that mentality. I mean, I had a client a year or two ago contact me. They were referred to me and they said, I hear you provide data throughout the search and guide us and give us tips. We don't need any of that. We just need resumes. And I said, okay, so we're not a match because I believe recruitment is a skill and a skill needs coaching, just like a sport. You can't, an elite athlete needs to improve their sport. So yeah, the best hiring managers view it as a skill and view it as a skill that needs coaching and honing.
And I guess the other thing is that, again, please correct me if I'm wrong again, and I'd love your opinion on this, is that the whole reason why that ethos is so good and so everybody should be taking that on board, that, you could literally approach every recruitment as if it was your first time, because
you should
think about how much, even if companies aren't changing, think about how much candidates are evolving and the way that they now have a stronger voice, how they feel about your recruitment process is something that they are starting to share. The platforms that they use, I mean, candidates seem to have evolved probably 5 times faster than companies, at least, probably.
Exactly. Also, I mean, okay, let's just not diminish the fact that it's a pandemic and probably a global recession at this point. This is a challenging time. So if you're ever going to learn, this would be the time to do it. But you're absolutely right. I view every single search I get, and I've been recruiting for 17 years. I view everyone like it's the first time, and I'm so excited. It's like literally a blank canvas. I see it like an artist. Like, we're literally going to uncover things. We're going to have surprises. We're going to try new processes. We're going to try a new structure. So there needs to be curiosity. I think if you approach it with arrogance so that's a funny thing though, because sometimes arrogance comes from insecurity, right? Yeah. And that's why self-worth and self-value we emphasize so much. Because I think when you truly bring self-worth, you can do it in a way, you can hire in a way that's not arrogant, and it's also not like I don't know the word. Like, you're not harming the process either. Yeah, I mean, because changing is scary, right? If somebody says to you, you should try something new in your recruitment process, you have to admit that, I think that some professionals have to think that, this whole, if it's not broke, don't fix it. Like, so I'm not going to admit the way that I was doing this for the last 5 years is wrong. I'm not going to go back to the drawing board. Candidates have to adapt to me, or, and again, that's the guilt and shame again. That's what I was just talking about. That's I can't admit something could have been wrong, but like, if you take that out of it, you're not guilty that you did it wrong 5 years ago. Let's not even call it wrong. Let's just say, I try to tell clients that let's not use the word bad or good. A good recruiting process, a bad recruiting process. Just take the judgment out. It's like you're learning. That's it. It's a student. You're a student in class. Every time you go, you should come excited.
And nobody's perfected this, right? Because there is no such thing. I mean, it's like arguing how long is a piece of string. You never know the candidate that you missed because you did something different, and you will never know exactly how you hit the nail on the head. And every recruitment is different. So like you said, I mean, I see the same thing in sales. I really do. There are companies that are still cold calling 100 people a day because it worked 10 years ago, and technically it still works now, but in a much worse way, and they're not seeing the side effects. And, you know, I just see so many similarities. And then, you know, on the flip side, luckily, we also have these really brave professionals that are out there trying to do things different. And even, like you said, they even slightly sometimes will sacrifice the result or the quality of the result just to feel good about what they're doing. I'm like, cold calling isn't fun, even if you win. Like, you don't wake up in the morning wanting to do it again.
True. Like I've owned my own business 7 years. I've never made a cold call because I don't like receiving cold calls.
Yeah.
And I've never met an HR leader who likes receiving cold calls. So I don't see the point. But of course, every sales leader would say that's insane. But if you ask my demographic of customer, they don't want it. You just reminded me though, and I want to mention it, when you were saying like companies who've done this well. I had a client a few years ago. She was great because, so I always provide data throughout the search, which I'm sure your ATS does as well. Like just, I gather, okay, the number of resumes that I've sent or the number of candidates I've sourced and where we're kind of falling short in the process or what our unique challenges are. And she called me and said, can you also add a section of lessons we're learning? Like, I want to make sure that I'm clear on like what we're learning through each step. Like, okay, if we, after the first round interview, if we get some negative feedback from candidates, can you write like what we can learn for the next time? It was so profound. And it was actually very humbling for me because of course it made me self-reflect as well of like, okay, so what would we do differently the next time? It was great though, because even to type it up and have it written for both of us. And I thought that's classic curiosity done well of like, I actually do want to do better next time. And she had a long career in HR, had worked in very sexy, big name companies. There was no reason for her, you know, to be humble because most people are like, oh, I've been in HR 30 years. I don't need this. Well, she did it. And, you know, it's a mindset shift. And again, it's like feeling that you're worthy enough to learn. You don't have to have all the answers.
And I think it's, you know, it's even like, this is why I love even kind of having great talks with people like yourself, because I also feel like there is this really kinetic, intrinsic joy of learning something new and going, wow, I never thought about that. And it's really hard to hear a good idea and not smile, right? Yeah. And it's the same across the board. So I think, like, again, even though I guess I really believe that probably it wasn't easy for her to consistently have that mindset, because it does take energy and effort. And sometimes the easier option is to just do the same thing. However, I would say with a relatively like kind of element of, with less doubt, is that I guess that she really enjoys her job more than some people in the space, because she just has a fresh approach and wants to do things different.
She had pride for what she did. She was proud of being an HR leader and proud to do the work. I think it's all connected. It's like feeling like your seat at the leadership table is worthy and you have a voice and you want to improve. And I think the reason some HR leaders don't struggle to hire best technology companies like yours or recruiters like me or the best coaches in the business, the reason they don't struggle with it is they feel deserving of it. And they don't hesitate. So the money is secondary to the value. It's like, I need these tools. I need these people. I need this team around me. It's like, again, I'm an elite. I think of athletic analogies, or you've seen my blog about the Ferrari analogy. It's like, if you are the best athlete or best car or best whatever, you need the best parts, you need the best tools, you need the best teams around you. It's a no-brainer to me. But if you feel like you're not worthy, you're not good at it, you'll never know the value of the people on the periphery, as you say, the team around you.
So I mean, I completely agree. I think, you know, and again, the only great thing about the fact that I agree is that I've only been in this space a few months. So I feel like this is not like trying to turn the oil tanker, but, you know, you can really adapt and try new things, and you can convince the people inside your companies to change their way of thinking relatively quickly. Yeah. So one question I would ask, because I think you said you really normally like give your clients numbers and statistics and so on. I think that from when I look at sales' history and why I feel like sales and marketing might be a little bit more confident, a little bit more developed internally, is because they are very numbers orientated. It's very transparent to see what went in and what came out, and everybody in the company is almost kind of pushing those professional skill numbers. And a lot of the HR people I speak to don't do numbers so much yet. Are there any kind of fundamental numbers you think that every recruiter, HR professional should really be trying to look into, even starting tomorrow, let's say?
Yeah, and let me also say that I think qualitative data is just as important as quantitative data. So the big
Sure.
pushback I hear, so you and I have both heard this in sales. We hear people say, oh, I avoid HR. They never get any budgets approved. Just go around them. And you and I are the stubborn ones that are like, no, we want to help HR people improve. We're gonna go with them, right? So
Yep.
one of the things to think about is, like, in recruiting, for example, you'll hear recruiters say, well, I recruit sales professionals. So it's easy for me to say to a head of HR or head of the company, you know, pay my fee because this sales professional is going to bring $1 million into your company in the next year, so it's worth it, right? I can't do that in HR because this person isn't going to bring in something quantitative.
Yes.
But they will bring in something qualitative. They will bring in something more holistic to the organization. So you have to be creative in talking it through. And so you have to look at all the pieces. Like, salespeople are under the HR umbrella, that they are going to be managed, led, trained, coached by HR.
Sure.
So it's all connected. It is really tricky. And I don't have an ideal perfect answer on what exactly you have to measure, but I think the key is to start thinking about it as, it's not just a cost center. Like, people think, well, HR doesn't bring any money in, so they don't have any value. But without HR, your company completely falls apart. So maybe you can't measure it exactly the same way as sales.
But I mean, yeah, I think, but I truly believe the numbers are there. I think that the other thing is, like you said, the challenge is that they're not always easy to calculate, which makes it a challenge as well, right? And even though I'm in the HR tech space, I would say very little of the HR tech tools have got there yet, where you can put a number in and they will give you a number out at the end. But like I would say, for one example I've got is I'm talking to a lot of HR leaders in the IT outsourcing space, and their CEOs are really on board with the cost of HR because they know the cost of either not filling an open role or filling it very slowly, because they know that like you said, they could be profiting from that new person every single day, even though it's an IT
HR hire. See why it's so hard for me? I can't measure that for an HR hire. You can measure it from a customer service hire or a sales hire, or even an engineering hire to some extent. But an HR hire, it's hard to do, which is why they'll often say we have no budget for HR. You don't see the ROI. So it is hard.
So I have a question. How, do you think that ENPS, so Employment Net Promoter Score, how is that a hot topic right now? Because I'm starting to think, HR and heads of people and directors of people, they really own employee satisfaction in the company. And I'm starting to see that more and more be turned into a number. And, hey, listen, look at, in the last 12 months, I've managed to increase employee satisfaction by X% with X amount of dollars that you gave me. Give me more and I will keep increasing it.
I agree. I think that's going to be so important. And it's funny, recruiting historically was bonused and reviewed based on retention, which I always thought was odd. Like, it's not the talent acquisition professional's job internally to make sure that Bob in marketing retains his staff, right? It's Bob's job to learn how to be a better manager. So I think also by bringing some of those metrics more to the organization as a whole, it allows HR to focus, as you're saying, on actual employee engagement and joy and satisfaction, as opposed to just turnover. Like, turnover metrics to me are always convoluted because you don't know why that employee decided to leave or what their personal situation was, and suddenly now HR is punished for it. So they're very complex issues. I think it's probably company to company to think about where they're struggling to see the value and how we can help them see it. But I don't think there's a magic answer yet for what metrics to look at.
I mean, in my previous company, we even had a very talented HR professional came in and did some consulting for us. This was before we even had a HR department or even team member. And by the way, we were at like 30, 40 people at that moment. And, you know, he asked us, he was like, what's your employee retention rate? And we were like, it's fantastic. We lose like maybe 1%. He was like, that, like, he didn't actually view high retention rate as always a positive. He's like, well, are you really, you know, setting good targets? Are you really kind of getting the most from people? Because, you know, you might be keeping everybody because they don't really care enough to leave or stay. And so it's, yeah, I mean, I really understand the challenge that HR professionals have of knowing that number and trying to, you know, appreciate it. But I think that there's try to find it, like you said, with some energy. Think about, you know, talking to team members, taking testimonials the same way that a marketing department would do that with their clients to try to convince the next client. So
Yeah.
I really hope statistics helps HR professionals, and I'll be doing all I can to make that happen as well. And I start to see that some are doing it. So, no, I mean, Laura, that sounds great. As we are coming to kind of wrapping up our time here, I think we could talk for hours. And I've got two questions for you. The first one is based on that, because I think your knowledge is phenomenally valuable. Where can people who are watching the video come and find out more about you, read more content? Where's the best place to learn a little bit more from yourself?
Thank you. Yeah, I'll make sure that Mick has my LinkedIn link, but I have a blog there that is really helpful, and I do a lot of activity there. But also I'm on Twitter and Instagram at Eastside Staff, and my website is eastsidestaffing.com, which has much more information as well. So definitely come and find me and ask any questions, and I'm sure Mick and I will be talking more about this as we continue to have light bulb moments.
Yeah, and I'll make sure all those lovely links are in comments and all that kind of fancy stuff. And, you know, Laura, as we finish every Inside HR, what are the kind of takeaway tips? Because we talked about some great things, but what are the things that you would kind of urge any HR professional to start doing tomorrow?
Yeah. So I know everyone's going to give you data and metrics, but I'm going to give you the touchy-feely stuff, because I think it's where we're missing some pieces. So one is, let's take the guilt, the shame, the blame, and the judgment away. So just being aware of that and catching yourself when you say, I feel guilty or I feel badly, you're learning. So every time you say that to yourself, just try to remember you're learning and you're evolving. So nothing to feel bad about. The second piece is, I think what Mick said, maybe not asking for permission, but just telling your CEO what you need. It's really clear. I need to hire 3 more people on my team. I need a new ATS. Here's why. And that's it. Don't over explain it. Don't oversell it. Don't overthink it. You can be confident in your ask, even if your voice shakes. And I think the third thing is really to have a community. So HR pros tend to feel very lonely in their lack of self-worth. They think they're the only one feeling this way. I talk to hundreds of HR people a week. They all feel they are struggling in some way to have a seat at the table, to feel valuable in their company. Some are better at it than others, and we learn from each other. So make sure you're creating a community so you never feel like your feelings are invalid. We're all in this together, and even Mick and I are continuing to learn. We're continuing to stay curious. We want to help you too. So never feel like you're in this journey by yourself.
Fantastic. I think they are really, really important. And I don't even think about them as being kind of like touchy-feely, but I think that they are actionable things that you can start to just think about tomorrow. And from the flip side, what I would say is that, if you are a head of sales, if you are a CEO or a founder, think about it like this. And I heard this story last week and I thought it was phenomenal. If you've got a goal to increase your number of clients by 200 next year, and you've got that in your business plan for 12 months, if you don't let your head of HR know that you're going to be hiring customer success or customer support representatives to actually take care of those 200 new clients, you're going to be playing catch up, because you are going to come to them the day before and suddenly go, I need 3 people because we've got more clients, and then those clients aren't taken care of. So it really helps you in your business plan to involve HR at the earliest moments of your strategy, of your planning, because you will need them at some point in the near future, I promise you.
Part of the strategy.
Yep.
Exactly right. And exactly, to any CEO who's watching this who thinks, oh, I don't need to include an HR pro in that meeting, you're wrong, because they will help you figure out the people part of your plan. You can worry about the numbers, you can worry about the creativity, but they need to worry about the people coming in, the people on the team. And absolutely, let's empower each other So I think HR pros can empower themselves, and CEOs and leaders can work on empowering their teams as well.
Perfect. Laura, that was phenomenal. I could literally keep doing this, but I am also aware of people have busy days and so on. So let's take that really great content, and please, I can't recommend enough. Please go and find Laura on LinkedIn, go to her website, read her blog. And I actually recommend just reach out to Laura if you've got any specifics or you couldn't really, pick those pieces that we gave you today and you don't really know how to implement them. I think that Laura is a great resource that you should be using. So Laura, thank you so much for your time. Everyone, thanks so much for giving us your time. It's super valuable. We hope you took something from it. And yeah, tune in next week for another episode of Inside HR. This one's going to be a tough one to beat. Laura, thanks so much.
See you soon, everyone.
Bye.
Stay well.